I'm going to talk to you about what we're calling active playful learning, and our goal is to find more joyful teaching and deeper learning. And I wanted to start with a quote by Yuval Noah Harari. He wrote this in 2021, but I think in the UK and in the US, this will really ring true. The Industrial Revolution has bequeathed us a production line theory of education. Now, it is easy to laugh at this model, and almost everyone does. And almost everyone agrees that no matter its past achievements, it is now bankrupt. And you all know that we've been talking, certainly for the last 10 years, and even more so in the last 5 years. What are we going to do with the education system in? And then you can fill in the blank from there. This in Europe and in UNESCO, in the OECD, everyone's wondering what can we possibly do to refashion education so that it would be fun again and so that kids might actually learn. And the question that has come to the fore, which I'm super excited about, is can the folks who study the science of learning help us think of new ways to have an educational transformation from the industrial age to the digital age and beyond? So I'm going to attempt, and it's a bold attempt, so I'm hoping you're all just going to come into the tent with me and help shape it with me to give you what we're thinking about as the way to convert that science of learning into practice for real people. Now, the controversy about education has been particularly debated in the early education field. And for me, early education goes all the way up to about 8 or 9 years old. And a recent paper by Peg Birchnall, 2024, said while the research is mixed, there's evidence of the potential of today's early education to accomplish the goal of improving long-term outcomes for many children. So how are we actually going to do this? This is Kathy's bold proposition for the day. Here it is. Programs that deliberately uplift and build connections between all aspects of kids' lives can make the biggest impact and are more aligned with how children's brains grow and develop. There it is. That's what the rest of this is about. If we could teach in the way that human brains learn, kids would learn more and they'd have more fun learning it. Now, at this point, you're probably going, duh, of course. Sitting in this room, we're all educators and scientists. We know this, but yet we haven't been doing it. So let me show you why. The science shows us that there are certain characteristics of experiences that seem to be very potent. One is that learning should be active, not passive. Think of what goes on in schools. It's hardly active when you're sitting there in rows. Schools should be engaging, not distracting. Schools should make what we're learning meaningful, not disjointed. Schools and pedagogies should focus on being more socially interactive. And yet, when we've looked at classrooms, we haven't seen much social interaction. We, in fact, see teacher talking at students, not with students. Education should be iterative in that it should change just a little bit as we learn about a particular topic from multiple viewpoints. And here's a biggie, guys. It's okay if education is joyful. So I call these the concept of active, playful learning. Now, amazingly, these characteristics, active, engaging, meaningful, socially interactive, iterative, and joyful, are the characteristics of how human brains learn. And if we can adapt them into school settings, look what we'd be able to do. So, we're going to talk about a suite of outcomes that can come from using these characteristics that I call the 6 C's. Kids need to learn today how to get along with each other, collaboration. They need to learn how to speak with one another, not just blab at one another on social media. Communication. They need to learn content. Yeah, we got to learn the alphabet. We have to learn the multiplication tables, but there's so much more. They need critical thinking, creative innovation, and confidence. And these 6 C's are united in the way developmental psychology and science has been done. Because the science of learning tells us that to get communication, you have to have good collaboration skills. To get content, you have to have good communication skills. To get to good critical thinking, you have to have content. Same with creative innovation. And we have to have the confidence, the growth mindset, and the grit to learn from failure. Finally, we learn best when the learning is situated in a meaningful context and it embraces the values of our clientele, of the kids in our classroom, of the parents in the neighborhood. And when you take those three pieces, you can define active playful learning as a kind of three-part equation. First, community and family values. Second, the science of how children learn, active, engaged, meaningful, socially interactive, iterative, and joyful. And mind you, that is with clear learning goal. And that should result in the 6 C's outcomes. Now, for the rest of the talk, I'm going to rely on this three-part equation as absolutely central to what we could be doing in schools, and we're kind of not doing it. So I'm going to show you today how this three-part equation can be used to create what I'll call playful learning landscapes, which are landscapes in the environment where adults and children can interact to bring about active, engaged, meaningful, so you're going to have this by the time we're done, meaningful, socially interactive, iterative, and joyful experiences, and hence the 6 C's. I'm going to show you how it can be used in school systems, and I'm going to hint at, because there's not a lot of time, to talk about how this can be used in digital experiences. So let's first take a minute to define what I mean by active playful learning, or what I sometimes call guided play. You can talk about having an explicit learning goal, whether the information is initiated by an adult or a child, whether the child has active involvement, and whether there's any child agency or choice. In free play, there is no explicit learning goal. It is initiated, however, by a child. The kid has a lot of involvement and the kid has agency. Contrast that with what we would call direct instruction, which is used in most British schools and in most American schools. There you have an explicit learning goal. The teacher is the one who initiates the situation for learning. There's virtually no active involvement by children, and there's virtually no agency or choice. But I want to take something in the middle, which I'm calling guided play. In guided play, you can have an explicit learning goal, like I want to teach math or I want to teach reading. It is initiated by the teacher. So think a Montessori education or think a good children's museum. The adult has given you a well-planned environment and a well-planned way that you can navigate the environment and likely come out with the learning goal. The kid thus has real involvement and the kid has real agency. So that's what I'm calling active playful learning, just so it's clear. Another way of looking at it is that you can have something that's initiated by a child or an adult and directed by a child or an adult. When something's initiated by a child and directed by the child, we call it free play. When it's initiated by the adult and directed by the adult, we call it direct instruction. Again, that is predominantly what's going on in our schools today. Now, there's a funny one here, which is when it's initiated by the child who starts making a beautiful picture and putting stickers on the picture, and the adult whips on in and says, "Oh, you're making a circus." Now, the kid didn't know he or she was making a circus. You've now usurped it or co-opted it, and the kid stops playing altogether. So we think the absolutely best spot is going to be in guided play, which is adult initiated, but child directed. Let's look at what that means. It can occur in two ways. One is a planned play environment, as in that children's museum, that's enriched with objects or toys that are going to provide just the opportunities you need to get to that learning goal. A second is, a very important part of it, is that teachers don't become sage on the stage anymore. they become guides on the side. They are much more like coaches than directors, asking open-ended questions, co-playing with the kids, suggesting new ways in which you can play with those materials. The research that we have done over the last 15, 20 years suggests that playful learning actually enhances social regulation, language and literacy skills, STEM learning, hypothesis testing or critical thinking, and even creativity. So I want to just give you a peek at the evidence. I'm going to do this as a drive-by, but stick with me because I don't want to belabor it, but I do want you to know it. Play and social regulation, people have studied impulse and emotional control, self-guidance, planning, self-reliance, attention, and memory, those executive function skills. Let's try Meg McClellan's wonderful example of conducting an orchestra or doing a drum circle. In those drum circles, you have to be aware of what the other kid is doing, or you're going to be out of step with the kids in the drum circle. And with that, you're actually building executive function skills. Turns out, in some recent papers, they said that if you want to promote executive function skills in preschoolers, there's lots of ways to do it, one of which is Simon Says, one of which is the game red light, green light, and one of my favorites, musical chairs. Also, when parents give kids more choice, then they develop more autonomy, and that helps them get self-regulation, which again builds EF skills. Playful learning and cognitive skills goes well beyond just EF, though. We've studied it in telling stories, wordplay, singing songs, conversations, and dramatic play, all of which build language and literacy skills. In some relatively current research, we asked how playful learning could increase vocabulary for children from under-resourced environments. So we had an adult. It was just a regular, circle time, reading time. And they read a book called The Knight and the Dragon. And they were learning new words like galloping and shield and moat. And afterwards, we had all these figurines that matched the characters in the story. And the kids were either in a free play environment, they heard the book, play however you want. They were in a directed play environment, or they were in a guided play environment. In the directed and guided, we gave them more hints about what to do, with the directed being a little bit more like a sage on a stage. And what we found, and this was Kathy's first shocker, because I expected that free play was going to be as good as guided play or direct instruction. In fact, if you'd asked me, I would have bet a lot of money on it. And I was wrong. It turned out guided play was the best, but not significantly different than directed play, which was all better than free play. So I'm trying to think about, what is that about? But when you think about it, free play leaves too many of degrees of freedom, right? Whereas guided play, like direct instruction, helps to limit where the kid can go next, which provides better educational opportunities. We also found that when we use different play activities, like singing, large and small group games, drama, and digital, our kids learn the target vocabulary as well or better as they did in the read condition. Now that's important because it means you can create something they love and want to be a part of, and they will learn just as well, if not better, than they learn in the let's slam the vocabulary words in them in a reading environment. Now we can do the same thing with STEM learning. This was a simple task in block play. We were just curious. If you just dump blocks in front of a kid and have an adult and child play together, does it change the dynamics of what they talk about? And the answer was an unqualified yes. Just put the blocks there and you get 3 to 6% higher use of terms like put the red block under, around, through, in, out. And that matters because these terms actually help build later spatial knowledge and later mathematical knowledge. In fact, we even tested that. We have this test that we came up with called the TOSA, which is the test of spatial ability. And here you see our 2D and our 3D models. And all the kid has to do is to reproduce the model. We give them the stuff and they get to do the model just as the model is here. You can tell also that they go from easier to harder. What did we find? Amazingly, I hope you're ready for true amazement, guys, because get ready for this one. It's like drum roll worthy, okay? And that is that the ability to solve these spatial tasks when you are 3 years old predicts your math ability at the entrance to formal school. That's kind of incredible. 78% of your math ability when you are 5 can be predicted by this test when you are 3. Whoa. And recent studies confirm our findings that guided play, but not free play, even fosters children's academic self-confidence in science. And then the stuff I really like that has come out of Alison Gopnik's lab and others is that preschoolers seem to outsmart even college students in figuring out gadgets. If we give kids the chance, they're pretty good critical thinkers, but you got to let them explore. A study that was done out of England and Cambridge University, I'm not sure I'm allowed to mention it here, but at Cambridge University a couple years ago was done by Skeen et al. And it shows that in all these different areas, literacy, expressive vocabulary, early math, shape knowledge, task switching, and pro-social behaviors, playful learning outstrips direct instruction and has huge impacts for kids. So that got us thinking, might this active playful learning actually work in schools? Like, what if we tried to scale it, got out of the lab, and went into real schools to see what would happen? Let's start with what's going on now. Now, I'm about to show you data that is shocking, but sadly, I strongly believe, that if I did this same study in England, I would find exactly the same results. What I have here are independent observations of behavior of what is going on in kindergarten and first grade. How do they spend their day? On the left is based on 1,100 separate observations of 42 classrooms. On the right, I forget the N, but it was even a bigger number. You can see that these numbers are kind of the same, but let's just look at it. The longest graph here on the left is that they are in parallel instruction. What does that mean? They are sitting at their desk. Teacher is talking at them. Often they are doing worksheets. Sometimes they are sitting in circle time with no conversations, just listening, okay? Parallel instruction. Now you see on the right-hand side, 38%. But let's look at non-academic. What does that mean? Well, you know, kids don't really love sitting there and not engaging with other kids. So a lot of what happens is the teacher spends a tremendous amount of time getting them to sit still or getting them to do the task that the teacher has asked them to do. We call that transition time or non-academic time. Oh, and then there's a 16% comes in, the kids are unoccupied. Now, could we just add this up for a moment, please, guys? Let's just look. That's 50 plus 26 is 76 and 16. That's 82% of your class time already, okay, in a normal day for kindergartners and first graders. We're now going up to fourth grade and looking at these same data. But you might think maybe there's some discussion going on at school, but no. Collaborative instruction? Nope, nope. Not a lot of questions being asked, and not a lot of kids working together. Are you stunned by this? I was stunned by this. To actually see it in print was like, oh my God. Okay, so we decided to do something about it. With a generous Lego grant, we were asked to go into 4 states in the United States, California, Illinois, Virginia, and Texas. And we're working up to getting 80 teachers that will be in each state, 40 who are going to get personalized coaching, 40 who will self-paced coaches. And we're going to study kids K through 4th grade. And we're going to train a group of coaches And then those coaches are going to go into the schools after we've trained them in active playful learning so that you have a train the trainer model. Okay, is everyone clear with what we're doing so far? Yeah? Okay, I don't want to confuse you here. All right. Now, with the most esteemed scientists in the United States, and really I mean this, we pulled together the top team you could ever imagine. So go to activeplayfullearning.com and you can actually see who's on this team. Many of you have probably read their papers: Peg Birchnall, Bob Pianta, Deborah Vandell, two deans of major education schools in the United States, Susan Levine, who's the queen of math learning. And everybody got together and said, okay, what does it mean? What would it mean to actively put active, engaged, meaningful, socially interactive, iteratives, together to a set of behaviors that teachers could actually do? Here's where it really helps to work with teachers, because the teachers on our team said it can be theoretically as sound as you want, but if it isn't going to work in a classroom, if it's not practical, why are you doing it? Okay? So we said, you're right. Let's think about it. So what did we come up with? Could we get away from whole group instruction and use small and paired groups? Now, people think they're going to have less control in that, but they don't. Because when you have 2 and 3 kids working together, they get so excited that they're actually doing more work, and you don't get that big unoccupied time that I showed you before. Next, can I increase students' contributions? Can they interact with peers and teachers? Well, the minute you have small and paired groups, guess what happens? The independent observers start to see that the kids start talking with one another. Can we have more hands-on, minds-on exploration, discovery, and inquiry? Things that they actually have to do. So what would that mean? Well, in one classroom that I went into, they were studying raindrops, and they wanted to see how many raindrops, and they had their little, dripper, and they would put it in a circle of a certain dimension, and they got to all talk about how many drops would it take to fill the circle. And then after they did that, they got to graph it. Those kids were so excited. And what they were doing was a STEM lesson, but doing it by learning about the theme of weather. Next, we can give students choice and voice in their own learning. Imagine that. The kids had some autonomy and agency. We can help children connect their learning to other experiences in and out of school. And gosh, it was a lot of fun. And that's what these kids taught us. This was so much more fun. So last year, we did our coach-based model in a pilot group of 42 teachers because we wanted to see if we could change things on the ground. Now, I should add, it is incredibly difficult to change teacher behavior on the ground. A number of us in the field have studied it for dozens of years and got no results. So when you see this, I hope you be, really excited. What did they find? The first part is what the teachers said about being in APL. They said that it helped their students grow in collaboration, communication, critical thinking, creativity, confidence, and self-regulation. Notice that in all these cases, you are looking at high 90s, like everyone was loving it. And 92% of the teachers said that they would recommend doing active playful learning to other teachers. Amazing. Now, when we asked them about their teacher practices, did you feel you could actually do this? They said, yeah. When we started building relationships, it was actually a nicer classroom environment. And we thought we were going to be in trouble by promoting student agency, but it worked. And we were able to differentiate the instruction. But you might say to me, well, yeah, but that's teacher report. They want to please you. Well, okay, let's go in and have observations by independent people who were observing it. Let's look at those people who had 2 months or less of coaching versus 2 months or more of coaching. Okay, everyone got it? So, what did we find? Students had a higher degree of agency in their learning. Yep, turned out the teachers were right. It was 42% higher when they had more coaching. How about teachers communicated ideas in a variety of different ways to help them learn? Yeah, it was 50% higher. So in every case, we found that the teachers were actually changing their behaviors, even in open-ended questions, which are the kind of questions where you don't just have one right answer, like what color is your shirt? Red. It's questions where you have to think. Were there more meaningful connections? Yeah. Like teacher explained the purpose of the lessons 135% higher. That's insane. Was there more positivity? Yes. So we'll have more data on this from this year. I think it's 185 classrooms, and we're going up in age. But these are really, really instructive. And this kind of pilot data says it is possible. It is possible to change teacher behavior. So we developed outreach in Spanish and English in the terms of pamphlets, in beautiful newsletters that we send out, and we personalize them for the state that we happen to be in. For those of you who are researchers, we have an observation manual, we have a coaching manual, we have a teacher manual. We are happy to share absolutely all of this with you. We have the coaching guidebook. We have the active playful learning operations manual that tells you about the study. And we have a whole lot of other states that have now approached us, Connecticut and New Hampshire, Oklahoma and Massachusetts, Alabama, New York, Oregon, and Pennsylvania, who are saying, hey, can we do this too? Why are they having all the fun? So if we can get funding, we'll be able to extend it to other places. The other thing I want to add is that I teach my college courses this way, which I know must seem bizarre. But in research that we've been doing over the last 2 years, I've actually used a theme-based approach to teaching psychological methodology, which can be absolutely deadly. And instead, everyone gets into it by applying what we're learning to various issues that need to be solved in the society. So it is doable at the college level too. Now, we're taking active learning, playful learning, and also incorporating it outside of school. What many people don't realize is that children only spend 20% of their waking time in school, 20%. And that begs us to ask what we're doing with the other 80% of our waking time. And for us, that's become playful learning landscapes, where we apply the same three-part equation. And let me show you what happens when you do. Remember, you want to nest it in the community. You want to put the how of learning with a learning goal, and you want the 6 C's as outcomes. This is one of our first projects. It was called Urban Thinkscape. And you see a picture here of Itai Palti, who was our wonderful architect. And there you can see Brenna Hossinger Das. And there are now 25 papers out on the playful learning landscape. So we're really quite excited about it. We went to the community, said, what do you want? What do you want in your community? And they said, you know what we want? We want a place our kids want to go that's not dangerous to go into. We want a place that's safe for them, a place where they will want to return to. Oh my gosh. We said, okay, we think we might be able to help you. And we took a bus stop. And we said, if we took this bus stop in this neighborhood, very small plot of land, what would you want to see here? And the community members got together. Still remember, it was a frigid night in January. And they all got together and they said, we want to honor Dr. Martin Luther King, who is a really important civic activist in the United States. And what we did is we said, okay, we'll build puzzles that will have Martin Luther King on it. And we'll build some other puzzles too. Notice we're getting people active and engaged at a bus stop. It's something that's meaningful to them at a bus stop. Got it? It's something that is joyful and socially interactive at a bus stop. What did we find when we did it? Well, first, note that we trained community members to participate in building the site, and we trained them to be data ambassadors. So they actually collected some of the observations on the site so that we had data. We watched 280 families, and we saw a 28% increase in adult-child language and in adult-child language around targeted spatial and number. That's kind of amazing. And we were comparing this against a local playground. So we did a pre and a post and also compared it against what happened at a local playground. Now, in Santa Ana, California, which is largely a Mexican population, they didn't want to do the same thing we did in Philadelphia. They wanted to create a game of loteria. And so they developed the cards for this game that they had played in Mexico when they were children. And this is what the bus stop looks like. Loteria went up yesterday in Santa Ana, California. And already the neighborhood is so excited about it. Now, this is what you can do in a library. Libraries are deadly for little kids, right? So what we did is we created a rock climbing wall, but the rock climbing wall was made of letters. And now these kids can't wait to go up the rock climbing wall and to spell words as they go up. Also, notice that little kid is sitting in the library stack, right? And you're seeing pieces of tangram puzzles that become the seating in the library. What happened? Well, the first thing is that the number of children using number, spatial, color, letter language increased 44% from pre to post test. But I'm really happy to tell you that adults in the environment started engaging with their kids and put down the digital technology. They also, believe it or not, ended up getting library cards. So now that library is a bustling place in the community where it had been fairly dead before. This is a game called Fraction Ball that was invented by Andy Bustamante, who was a postdoc in my lab at the time and is now at University of California, Irvine. What it is a normal basketball court with a $65 intervention. We painted the court so that the three-throw line became a 0.75 or 3/4. Then you got a 0.5 or half. Then you got a 0.25 or a quarter. And the kids could act out what was going on in the throwing by keeping the score on the side. So you have the game players over here, and you have a group of kids over here keeping score so that they go up to a particular number and not beyond it. The kids were 4th to 6th graders. That means they were 9 to 11 years of age. One of the hardest things to learn when you're 9 to 11 years of age is fractions and decimals. But after just 4 recess periods of 15 minutes each, these kids went into the classroom and passed standardized tests of fraction decimal conversion. The teacher had so much extra time, she was thrilled. Over here, you see what we're doing in supermarkets. Supermarkets are places that could be much more exciting for kids. Here you see one on the far right from South Africa. On the far left, this is coming out of Tulsa, Oklahoma. And they're dumb signs like, what sound does a cow make? Cows make milk. What else do you think cows make? And then the kids run around looking at various cheeses. They look at sour cream. They look at butter. And they're finally having conversations with their parents. Murals is another way. You can design murals for the community. You can already imagine that this is from Santa Ana, which is a largely Mexican town, as I told you. So they really went all out in creating the Mexican flavor of their little town. But notice what we did. We added an I Spy game in the middle of the mural. Can you find it? If you can, you're building attention. Whoa, look how you can just functionally build in the science of learning into the built environment. Here's what we've done in hospital waiting rooms. Now, that's a place that needed some help. In the United States, there's really nothing worse than a clinic hospital waiting room. People wait there for way too long, and there's nothing to do. So we changed that, made it picture this, and what do we find? We found that the kids, excuse me, the kids sorry, the kids love to find the different things in their neighborhood. And so they do. And then they talk about stories. And all of a sudden, the clinic wakes up as they have these brilliant conversations with other adults and with other children. Over here, you can see that we can even adapt these to more classic or ancient designs like you might find in Oxford or in Venice. Just show you two of them. This is a fun one. It's actually a hopscotch game. Okay, but it's not really a hopscotch game because it's built from a task in psychology called the happy sad task. And you go from 2 to 1 to 2 to 1 to 2. But you ask the kid, can you put 1 foot where you see 2, 2 feet where you see 1, and it becomes an impulse control task. This was designed by Dedra Gentner. We haven't yet put it into action, but I can't wait to. It's analogy stepping stones, which I'm sure we can come up with a better name for. But what you see is an ABA, an ABA kind of format. See that? Now, none of the items in here are the same, but the ABA, ABA, here's ABB, ABB. Can you cross this line by only doing ABAs? Or can you cross the line by only doing ABBs? So, we've developed playbooks in multiple languages that communities can use. We have these in, I understand as of yesterday, the Chinese book is done, Portuguese, Spanish, and in English. And somebody just asked me if they could translate it into German. We have a clear way to measure the impact of the installations, interaction with families and communities. And by the way, anything you think of as I walk around the streets of Oxford, what could I do that would make a wall stand out? What could I do that would give kids somewhere to look for something interesting that they could find to build cognitive capital? And finally, it can be applied to digital apps like the metaverse and other things that are coming down the pike and apps. So we're feeling pretty excited about this 3-part equation as a way to answer UNESCO's plea. How can you take the science of learning and instead of just building in functionality, can you actually build in something that will be intentional? And when it's intentional, will help build better learning skills. This is a piece we did in digital media. And just 2 days ago, I had a lovely conversation with the people who do Apple Education. And they're thinking of using some of our science of learning equations to build better educational products in the metaverse. Lots of papers on all these topics that you can read. And so the key for us is that if we take the 3-part equation seriously and we take community and culture seriously, we think we can actually make a difference for how kids learn. This work, as you can imagine, has been supported by tons of people who have made it come from a pilot to reality. And so I thank all of them. And I also thank my collaborator, Berta Golenkoff. Without her, none of this would have happened. So thanks so much.